Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gloria for Gloria's Knits, and today is podcast number 2. So we'll go through the regular kind of flow of knitting podcasts where I talk about what I'm wearing today, any finished objects, works in progress, and finally, any plans or acquisitions. So let's just jump right in. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe to my channel. We're slowly building a little knitting community here, which makes me so excited. And yeah, let's just get started on today's video. Okay, so first off, we'll be talking about what I'm wearing today, which is a cardigan. This is the pattern by Petite Knit. It's the Esther Jacket, actually. But for me, I wear it more so like a cardigan as opposed to a jacket. I don't really plan on wearing any like bulkier items underneath this piece. So it's really just gonna go over like a t-shirt, which is how I would normally wear my cardigans. And I really like the design of this. As you can see, the sleeves have the cool little like pattern, stitch pattern that is also evident on the body. So I really like the fit of this. I made this in a extra small. So it's actually the smallest size that this pattern comes in. It doesn't have as much positive ease as what the pattern actually suggests. Mine only has about like 6 or 7 inches. So it's a bit more, I wouldn't say form-fitting, but it's not like super oversized. And I really enjoy this. Just a little bit about the pattern and the construction of this cardigan. It is a drop shoulder cardigan with a high kind of like crew neck. The whole thing is pretty much charted. You just follow the schematics of the chart and you knit when you need to knit and purl when you need to purl, do your increases when it tells you to. So pretty straightforward. I didn't have too much trouble following the instructions for this pattern, so I really recommend it if you enjoy this type of style. I find it's really easy to wear and I've worn it already so many times, even though fall just started, but it's just really cozy. I knitted this in the Lion Brand's Fisherman's Wool. So super rustic wool and just very easy to work with. It's a little scratchy and like a bit of a sheepy smell when I was knitting it. And especially when I was blocking it, it made like the whole room smell like sheep. And I don't know how I feel about that, but once it dried, I didn't really have that problem anymore, so that was good. And yeah, after it blocked, it really opened up the stitches and just grew quite a bit. It originally looked quite small after I knitted this, and once I washed and blocked it, it grew like a few inches, like lengthwise, widthwise. The sleeves were a much better like length now, as you can see. They're pretty much like right at the base of my wrist and not super oversized, but that's only because I had to play a bit of yarn chicken. I didn't really want to buy another ball of this because these skeins of Lion Brand Fisherman's Wool is massive. They're like, I think 220 grams or something like that. So they're really big. I wanted to just use 2 skeins. And if I were to buy a third one to make this like longer or more positive ease, it would just not really be worth it in my eyes. That's why I made it a bit smaller than what was suggested, but I don't really mind it. I really like it anyway. But yeah, that's what I'm wearing today. And let's move on to finished objects. So the first one I'm going to talk about is my only finished object. I mean, knitting takes a while, so it's not fair for me to literally have finished objects every week. And my last knitting podcast was only about 2 weeks ago, so I think this is a pretty good progress, I would say. This is the Petite Knit Stockholm Slipover V-neck, and my modified version, it's pretty modified as you can see. It is a textured slipover now. It's no longer just a stockinette, but it was just missing the bottom rib last time I showed you guys, but now it's pretty much done. I did like about 4 inches of ribbing at the bottom, and after it has been washed and blocked and worn twice, this is how it's looking like. And I'm really happy and satisfied with the final result. I love the contrast between the white, well, not white, the cream colored trim with the super dark navy body. So just a little bit about this pattern. If you guys didn't know, this is a pattern by Petite Knit. It is a slipover with a deep V, and you start from the back construction first. So you just work the back all the way down to the end of the armhole, and then you pick up stitches for both the right and the left shoulder, and then you do increases to shape the neck, and then you connect once they're at the kind of base of this V-neck, you connect both sides and then you join in the round, and then you just knit in the round until the length that you're happy with. For me, I didn't knit this too long just because this is stash yarn, so I just wanted to use all my navy yarn that I had left in stash and just knit it until the very end. And that is why I also did a contrast trim, because I didn't have enough yarn to just make the whole thing in navy. But yeah, with the modifications for this pattern, I'll link down below the Ravelry project page that I followed for this modified version of, you know, having some knits and purls in the stitch pattern as opposed to just straight stockinette. So I really enjoy this pattern. I will say that after blocking this slipover didn't grow as much as my slipover that was just knit purely in stockinette. I'm not too sure why. Maybe I had like tighter tension on this, or it's just a completely different yarn. The other one that I made is actually in Patton's classic wool worsted yarn versus this one is knitted in Cascade 220. So yeah, last time you saw this, only the ribbing was missing, and now that I've completed it, I would say it is very cute, very up my alley, super easy to wear. I literally have already worn it a few times to work, and people have commented and complimented me on it. So I'm really happy with this. And yeah, I don't have too much to say about this. The only thing that really, I would say, not bothered me, but I struggled with is the neckline. I've made, this is my third slipover. So let's just be clear here. It's not like this is a new pattern to me. I've made this pattern 3 times, and I've done this neckline a total of 3 times for this exact slipover. For some reason, I just couldn't get the right pickup rate. So the first time I picked up all the stitches around the neckline, it was fine, but I managed to pick up like a stitch really weird on the side, like over on this edge here, and it was just like coming out of the wrong stitch. So it looked super out of place, and I didn't notice that until like maybe half the ribbing was already done. So I had to frog back, did it the second time, and then the second time, somehow my markers were placed a little bit skewed. So my double center decreases here, they were shifted over by just 1. And I didn't notice that until nearly the end of the ribbing. And that's when I was like, wait, why does it look lopsided? So then I had to frog it back again. And then on the third try, I made sure everything was correct before I just kept going and not like start knitting too quickly and then just be impatient. So therefore, finally on the third try, I got the correct neckline, and I'm really happy with it. I love the kind of the style of the slipover and the deepness of this V neck. I think I did a really good Italian bind off as well. So it looks really even, it looks very cinched in, and it doesn't look like stretched out or anything like that. Hopefully it stays this way. I'm not 100% sure since I've only worn it a few times, and this is pretty much like fresh off the needles. So like in terms of wear, don't know how it's going to be, but hopefully it is good since this is a good like kind of budget-friendly workhorse type yarn. Not super soft, but just soft enough for me, so I'm pretty happy with it. Another modification I did is on the sleeves here. I did do about 2 decreases along the base of the kind of armhole. Just, it's not particularly neat. Doesn't look great. I just did some like random decreases there at like, I think every like 2 or 3 rows of the ribbing, just so it doesn't like flare out. My first slipover, I felt like the ribbing like flared out this way and it didn't look that nice. So okay, let's move on to works in progress. So I have one new cast on that I wanted to show you guys, and it is my Eva Cardigan. So a little bit about the pattern first. This one is by Petite Knit. Again, I knit a lot of Petite Knit patterns. It's a really good like beginner friendly type of writing style, and I just really enjoy her like sleek modern types of garments that she creates. So with this one, it is a stockinette set in shoulder sleeve cardigan with a very chunky 2x2 knit button band, and I'm super all for it. Like, it's just super cute, and I think it looks really like polished. It's not your typical drop shoulder cardigan, which I like, but with this construction you don't have to pick up stitches for the armhole, which is really nice. It's also a DK weight pattern, so very easy to find like DK weight yarn. I'm holding 2 fingering weight yarn held together so that I can get the DK weight gauge. When I did my gauge swatch, it was pretty like spot on. Might be off by like half a stitch, but I'm not too worried about it. And I really like the fabric it created with a 4.5 millimeter needle. So I did have to go up a size in needle as opposed to the suggested needle size of 4 millimeter, which is pretty typical for DK weight patterns, but that's okay. I mean, everyone has slightly different knitting styles and tensions, and I guess with this yarn, because there's like zero stretch with it, I had to go up a needle size, and that's totally okay. So 4.5 millimeter needles for me to knit this, and I've literally gone through the entire yoke. In terms of construction, you start off with the back panel here. You do increases for the shoulder, and then you pick up some stitches along each of the shoulder, and you knit like this little piece here, and then you connect all 3 pieces and you do more increases to open up the sleeve of the shoulder, and also some increases for the raglan. So very mindless knit. I think it was very easy for me to just like tune it out, and as long as I kept track of my stitch markers and did the increases based on where the stitch markers were, it was really easy for me to just like follow along and knit while doing other things. So I really like to multitask while I'm knitting, preferably when I'm watching TV or just like chilling at home, nothing too like crazy. I can't really do that with non-stockinette projects, like things that require me to constantly look at the chart. So very intricate lace or cabled patterns, or even with my Esther jacket, like with this pattern right here, I did memorize the pattern repeat at some point, but before then, it was still like I had to constantly look at the chart. And even when it was memorized, it's not like you can shut off your brain while you're knitting. So I still had to think about whether I need to be knitting or purling each of the stitches. But with this, because you just have to know when to increase for the top yoke, it doesn't really matter like if you're watching TV or something like that. So those are my favorite types of knits. So very happy with this. Also, I chose this pattern because of the shoulder construction. I really like, it's a little hard to see how it opens up like this, and it gives it the look and feel of like a set-in shoulder, which is really hard to replicate with knitting. I find a lot of patterns are usually just your simple raglan or a drop shoulder, but this one has like a cool set-in sleeve, and it's also not like a full saddle shoulder, which I think that one looks a bit more like masculine, which is totally fine. That's also a look too. I do at some point want to knit a saddle shoulder sweater or cardigan, but for this one, I really like kind of the look of the set-in shoulder sleeve, and very fun to do the increases and the shaping of this. The only issue I had with this is that my needle cable is actually not that long. So as you can see, it's already like a little bit scrunched up here on this needle, and this is with the sleeve stitches already on hold. I think there's maybe like 60 or 70 stitches already on hold for each of the sleeves. So if you can imagine, all these stitches were also on the needle at the same time. It was just so scrunched up, and I didn't have a longer needle, so I just had to power through. If I had to knit a bigger size, I don't even think I would be able to do that, because like, yeah, it would have just fallen off my needles and it would have been really annoying to deal with. But this one, I did knit it in a size extra small, which should give me about 10 inches of positive ease, which is perfect. I love that amount of positive ease because it's just the right amount of being oversized, but not like so big where it looks like you're wearing something that doesn't fit you at all. So I really like kind of finding that balance, and I did try it on as I was knitting to make sure the yoke depth before I split for sleeves was big enough, and also there was enough like positive ease around the body. A little hard to gauge just because the stockinette does roll on itself, and also I didn't have my button band knit, so tried to kind of gauge, and there is a little bit of leeway. I'm okay with it being like a little bit less than 10 inches, a little bit more than 10 inches, just like around 10 inches is fine with me. And when I did my gauge swatch on 4.5 millimeter needles with this yarn, I noticed that after washing and blocking it, it didn't really grow. So I'm pretty confident that after washing this entire garment, when it's done, it will just like smooth out the stitches. It won't look as like crumply, but it won't get bigger in size. So I can knit the length and width to how I want it, as opposed to other yarns that I've used in the past. I think when there's more twists in the yarn, it does loosen up quite a bit, and then your finished garment ends up growing a little bit after blocking. So with this one, I don't have to worry about that. I can knit it and try it on and like, gauge whether or not it's the right length for me. So yeah, not too worried about that. And another thing I want to talk about is that after washing this yarn, it did fluff up and soften a lot. So definitely better after washing it. Right now it is really scratchy and there is zero stretch when I'm knitting it. It's a little hard on my hands. It's not as like comfortable as knitting with like my Cascade 220 for the vest that I just did, like the Slipover. This one, very, very hard on my hands, and I do have to keep the tension quite tight. That's generally just how I knit, so it's a little hard to change that, which is totally okay. And I just think that I'm more so a finished garment knitter, so I really kind of just want like the end product, and I want something a little bit more mindless when I'm knitting. I'm not all for like really intricate patterns. Like occasionally I will do some lace or cable work, but I do find that those drag on a lot longer than my stockinette pieces, which is why I decided to go with this Eva cardigan. Another thing I don't really like is knitting with two strands of yarn. When you're knitting anything with two strands of yarn, you have to be very careful with picking up both strands when you're knitting and purling. So if you leave one strand behind, that's just gonna ruin the entire row. Like you'll have to frog back or you have to tink back, and like it ruins the tension. It more so is easier to miss the second strand when it's like very thin, like a mohair. I found with my cardigan number 8, I like always forgot to pick up the mohair when I was holding it with the heavy merino. So like the heavy merino would be knit through, but then like I forgot and like dropped the mohair strand, and it's very annoying. With two strands of fingering, it's a little bit easier to tell when I dropped a stitch, but not dropped a stitch, dropped a strand. So I was able to kind of notice it more quickly because it just looks significantly thinner. The only upside with this yarn is that I don't have to like join a lot of yarns. Because this comes in a cone of 200 grams and it is fingering weight. So it's equivalent to like 4 balls of like your typical 50-gram balls of fingering weight yarn. So I hardly ever had, well, I haven't had to at all join any new cones of yarn. I only have 3 cones. Most likely I should use like 2.5, not too sure. But even with wool, when it's 100% wool and you need to join yarn, I usually just do the spit splicing, which is where you like unravel the twists of the yarn and then you cut like half of them, and then you join the other piece, and then you just rub them together with some water, and it should felt on itself, and therefore you get a very strong join. That's usually the number one reason as to why I like to knit with wool. It's just for the ease of connecting yarn balls. With this, I don't have to worry too much, even though it's 100% wool and I can spit slice it. I just don't need to because they're in these very large cones. I'm not sure if I mentioned this, but it is yarn that I mentioned in my first podcast, which is the yarn I bought from Korea. And this is the Rusk yarn from Som Som Knit. It's 100%, I think, Shetland wool. So very, very sturdy and rustic wool, very scratchy. But it's okay, it's a cardigan. Like I'm gonna be wearing something underneath anyway. But yeah, that is my Eva cardigan. I do also want to mention that the raglan increases here, it's like a 3-stitch raglan and it's like so thick and chunky, and I just love that. I don't particularly like when a raglan increase just has like 2 stitches in the middle. So between the stitch markers, it's like here, there's 3. I really like 3. 2 is still okay. 1 I don't prefer in my like sweaters or cardigans. I don't know why. I think it's just a preference in terms of like the design that I really like. But yeah, very much enjoy this, and I can't wait for the finished garment. What I struggle the most with knitting is actually doing the button band and the sleeves. So in terms of button band, usually it's like 1 by 1 ribbing. I don't like to do ribbing. It's not like my ribbing sucks. I just think it's like a lot of work, and my hands get a little tired switching from knit, purl, that sort of thing. This one, because it's a 2 by 2 ribbing, maybe it'll be a little bit better because I'm knitting 2 and then purling 2. So you're like flicking your yarn back and forth a little less often as opposed to just doing a full 1 by 1. But I do think the 2 by 2 rib is very statement-like, and it just gives it a little bit like pop and makes it a bit more unique than just your typical 1 by 1 ribbing, such as with this one. This is a 1 by 1 ribbing, and I do really like it. And this one is thinner 1 by 1 rib. This one will have a very thick button band that's 2 by 2 rib. So a little bit of a difference. So yeah, I don't think I will be stuck on Body Island for long. I do very quickly knit through the yoke and body for the most part, and just spend the most time on the arms because I do magic loop. Magic loop is a little bit more annoying. I don't love to do magic loop. I find it's a little hard to avoid laddering, but for the most part, it looks like sort of okay after you block it, and it's just not as fun. Yeah, I think like the body is just so much more fun where you could just like watch it get bigger and bigger, and then you could try it on to see like how the length is going. But then once I reach the ribbing, it'll take me forever. So hopefully I can finish this before winter gets really cold. Right now it's okay. Some of the mornings here in Toronto has been like 2 degrees. So I've been wearing this cardigan quite a bit, and also my cardigan number 8. So yeah, I could definitely use another cardigan. Okay, next up, I do want to talk about some plans and acquisitions. So recently, Michael's had a sale. I love to buy yarn from them every time they have a sale with like 30% or 40% off yarn. Usually it's just like off one item, but when they have it off like an unlimited supply of yarn, that's usually when I make my purchases, just because I don't want like skeins of yarn with different dye lots, which can happen unless you go in store yourself and you pick it out, which is the downside of big box stores. But yeah, let me just show you. The yarn that I got is yarn that I've used before, and it is the Patton's Classic Wool Worsted in the colorway Heath Heather. So this is a different colorway. Last time I got, I think it was like the dark gray one. I've already wound them up into cakes. I know most people would just like pull from the ball itself because it's already like wrapped up, right? But for me, I find with this wool, because it's so like sticky and sometimes they just don't wind it up properly. My last ball, I had a lot of tangles and knotted pieces. So every time I pulled from the center, it would just like vomit out so much yarn, and it was all tangled together. And sometimes I would be stuck untangling that giant mess for like over an hour, and I was just like not having it this time. So I made sure I actually just wound them up, got rid of all of the tangles, which there were tangles when I was wounding this up. So but at least it wasn't attached to a work in progress, because that is the worst, where like you have to like thread your project through the tangles, and it was just too naughty. I cannot deal. So yeah, that is why I have them caked up already. I really like the colorway of this one. It's a very good neutral. I love my neutrals. I just nothing more to say about it. Very simple, rustic wool, 100%, and I love this. I used this for my second Petite knit slipover, Stockholm slipover, and I really enjoyed working with it. It's very bouncy. It knits up really well. It hopefully will be long wearing, long lasting, but more to say on that. I like all my pieces are knit this year, so it's not like I've got a chance to wear them all that much yet. But yeah, I bought 5 of these, and hopefully that is enough to make a slightly oversized sweater. So I'm not looking to make a massively oversized sweater because I don't think 500 grams is enough, but maybe like a cropped oversized sweater I think should be fine. My arms are a little bit long, so sometimes I do end up making the sleeves longer than what patterns suggest. But yeah, very excited with this. I'm hoping to maybe make the Ozetta Lakes pullover. It has a really cool saddle shoulder design that I've never tried before, but I'm not 100% sure on it. I kind of like rummaged through the Ravelry projects of like other people, and I saw people have used this yarn before to make that pattern. But I don't know if I really love how there's like how it joins on the saddle shoulder, because you have to like pick up stitches along this like piece for the shoulder, and I'm just worried it'll look kind of like bulky or like it stand out too much. I'm not really sure. Like I want it to lay more like flat, and I don't know if it's due to technique or due to the person knitting it or due to the yarn that could cause like a little lumpy effect. But yeah, I'm not 100% sold on that yet. I also want to be a bit more conservative in terms of buying new patterns, because I feel like I've bought a lot of patterns this year. And I'm all for reusing patterns. So not just knitting them once, but knitting them multiple times because I like the style of it, or maybe I'm making it for a family member, a friend. But yeah, like I don't want to get swept up into the hype of just constantly buying new patterns, especially like new ones that come out. I do want to make things that are practical, the ones that I will wear, ones that I will enjoy knitting, because all of this kind of is part of the process. So yeah, not 100% sold on Lake's pullover yet because I don't really want to buy a new pattern. I have a men's petite knit Northland sweater pattern that I have, that I use to make my fiance's sweater. But I do find the neckline is a little too high for a women's sweater. So maybe I might have to modify that if I want to use that pattern. But I think that would meet Gage, because I used a Cascade 220 to make his sweater. And with this one, I find it's like similar needle size and like gauge I would be able to reach with this compared to the Cascade 220. So hopefully I find something where I don't have to buy a new pattern, but I am open to it if I absolutely need to, because this is still my knitting hobby, and I just will knit if like the pattern really speaks to me. So yeah, not 100% sure yet, but that's the plan with my new acquisition in this bag of caked yarn. Last thing I do want to talk about is my second slipover that I do want to fix. And this is the slipover that I'm talking about. So it's the same Stockholm slipover that I showed in the navy one, but this one is just straight stockinette. I didn't do all that many modifications with this one. The only thing with this, even though I knit this the same size as the navy, the neckline I think is just too like deep. I think my Italian bind off is not tight enough, and I really have to like go in, undo the bind off, do it again so that it's tighter, so that it doesn't like just hang so low. I just feel like it looks really messy. There are bits of it where it's like a little lumpy. It doesn't look 100% like perfect. Not that knitting has to look perfect. I just find it bothers me enough such that I notice it when I look in the mirror, and it's just too low. It shows too much of my t-shirt when I'm wearing it, and I'm not about that. My sleeves are okay. I think the bind off that I did on my sleeves are not bad. Not sleeves, the armhole. So I think this looks really clean still. It didn't stretch out all that much, but maybe the weight of the fabric as I'm wearing it, it just like pulled it down some more. So that's why the neckline looks so enlarged. But yeah, I'm hoping I could undo this bind off, which is really annoying because since it's a sewn bind off, you have to like undo each stitch and pull it out, which will make the yarn all like fuzzy and like not all that usable. So that will take some time to undo it, and then I will likely just cut off that piece of yarn and spit splice a new piece of yarn, since I still have some of this yarn left over, so that I could do a new bind off. And hopefully it solves the issue here where the neckline looks way too oversized. But yeah, that's one thing I need to do, along with finishing up my Eva cardigan before I cast on any new projects. Those are my priorities for now. I don't like to have too many projects on the go. Usually I try to limit it to just 3. So right now I still have my Blue Wave cardigan, which is on the needles. I'm not in too big of a rush to do that one just yet, just because it's a lace pattern. It's very like open gauge, so it's not all that much wearable come the winter time. And I do want to prepare for the cold weather because in Toronto it gets really, really cold. So that one is just on hold right now, but it's still like on my needles. So I don't want to just completely put it into hibernation and forget about it, because then I'll never pick it up and I'll forget the pattern repeat, because like it'll just be too big of a gap in between like when I last picked it up and when I will pick it up next. So I do want to finish it. It's not of top priority, but I do at some point need to finish the I-cord edging and the two sleeves. I also have a pair of socks that are on the needles that I haven't showed you guys because I haven't worked on it for a bit, but I do need to restart that. And I'm putting that off because I'm at the part where I have to do the heel flap and gusset. So it's the heel part. I've never done it before. It's my first pair of socks. I've literally only done the ribbing at the top and like a few inches of stockinette. So I need to learn this new technique, which I'm just putting it off. I just wanted to work on something mindless. That's why I was working on my Eva cardigan, because I've done increases before, I've done knit stitches before, I've done purl stitches before. So even though it's a new shoulder construction, all the techniques are like I've already learned them. So I don't have to put too much thought into knitting this. So I just wanted something like a little bit more simple. But yeah, those are the things on my needles right now, and I don't want to cast on any new projects until I finished one. So I do max 3. Maybe that might change in the future, but for now, we'll just keep it at a maximum of 3 and not add on new projects that I will feel overwhelmed with. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below any exciting projects that you're working on. I would love to know, and we could just all be happy knitting together. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.